Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Namaste Wellness Show, where we talk about all things holistic health for the mind, body, and spirit with a touch of cultural soul. My name is Laura. I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm talking again with our very special guest, Dr. Robert L. Greene, about his life and legacy as a civil rights activist, educator, and author, and all-around family man. So I want to welcome you back again for part two. No, actually, this is part 4. So welcome.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
So how are you doing today? Thanks
I'm
for
doing fine. It's good to see you, and I'm always happy to participate on your program. You always have good questions to ask.
Thank
And remind
you.
me of the past, because I am getting old, Laura. I want all the viewers to know that I am now 90 years old.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Yes, I know we talked about on the last show, we talked about you just had your 90th birthday back in November 2023. And now we are in February 2024, which is
Yes.
Black History Month. So I'm really excited to have you on to talk about your legacy and all the things you've done for the civil rights movement. So today our topic is going to be on the work that you did with African-American college athletes in terms of improving their conditions and resources, particularly starting at Michigan State University, where you were a professor on the campus there. So I want to start with a little quote from your book, At the Crossroads of Fear and Freedom.
Yes.
Shortly after Dr. King's death, which was on April 4th, 1968, we know that from history, new racial tensions on campus began to emerge. First, many of the Black student athletes at MSU's football team were unhappy for a number of reasons. Some of them, Lamar Thomas, a very bright star running back from Chicago, among them, had discussed the situation with me, alleging that the coaches were, quote, stacking some of the team's best Black players, forcing them to compete against each other for similar positions to ensure that whites would have a clear to be starters at other positions. So can you tell us a little bit about that background? I know further in the reading, you mentioned that you weren't so sure about the stacking, but it was more of having assistant Black coaches. So if you can tell us a little bit about the background.
Yeah. Well, I really didn't understand stacking at that time until Jimmy Ray and some other Black athletes came to me and explained it to me. What coaches would do, they would pick out 2 or 3 top Black players they wanted, recruit them, and have them compete against each other and not compete against the white athletes. So the white athletes would have a clearer shot at a position, even though they were not as talented as the Black athletes. They call that stacking. And I guess it was Jimmy Ray, Bubba Smith, and Toady, Bubba's brother, that eventually came to me about discrimination. Also, when I noticed the other day, Mr. Norman, the referees that were Black, there were no Black referees at the professional level. The big push for athletes, Black refereeing, as an example, was at the collegiate level. And later on, Blacks became active as referees and officials, but there were no Black officials. So discrimination in sports was a significant factor, but the push on the part of college students led to more activity in terms of blacks being able to officiate. So officiating was another concern that black athletes had,
Okay.
and they knew that they could depend on me, athletes. They knew I'd be honest with them, and they knew that I would support them. And so the Jimmy Rays, the Bubba Smiths of the world, they spread the word around the Big Ten with all black athletes that Green is a person you can go to and he can be trusted. And
Now you actually called yourself in the book. You said I was an unpaid recruiter and counselor to many black student athletes. So because you were a professor, your subject wasn't coaching, or so how did you become that mentor for so many black athletes? Or
I think a person who was very much responsible for that, if there was any athlete that was responsible, would be Bubba Smith. Bubba Smith and Jimmy Ray, I had a picture of them. I have to try to get my son Kurt to get it to you. Came by my house, and they sat and talked with me about discrimination in sports. And a lot of individuals always felt sports was fair. And no discrimination in sports. That's one place that everything on the playing field is even. Well, everything on the playing field wasn't even. Black athletes didn't get the resources that white athletes got.
and what kind of resources were they not getting that the white athletes were getting? What was the difference?
A big difference was equipment. Having first class equipment, having money to travel to other games, getting to know other athletes.
But the teams were integrated though. So some of you are saying that if they had a game in another state, the white athletes were able to go, and sometimes the black athletes couldn't go because they couldn't travel.
Not necessarily. Not if it made a difference in terms of winning. In sports, white coaches wanted to win as much as black coaches. And so they managed to get resources to do what they needed to do to travel. Travel was a big thing. Lodging was a big thing. I never forget, I had an old professor at Michigan State a white professor, Wilbur Brookover. He used to tell me that he would sometimes at spring break travel with the baseball team to the South to make sure that black athletes, baseball players, were treated as fairly as white baseball players. So lodging was an issue. Getting resources on campus was an issue. There was always an effort on the part of black coaches, white coaches primarily, to make sure that black athletes had what they needed to win. Winning was always important. And so that's where blacks felt they were not always treated fairly. They were treated fairly because they were just good athletes. They were treated fairly because coaches wanted to win. And Michigan State was always a very hungry university when it came to winning.
Okay.
Football, basketball, baseball, the top sports, the coaches would do whatever they could to make sure that they had the resources to win, even for black athletes.
Okay. So it sounds like the coaches wanted to win, so they were doing what they could to make things easy for the black athletes But who was it, who was discriminating against the Black athletes then?
I would say, uh,
Because if they wanted everybody to win, right?
they wanted to win. You're
Yeah.
right. They wanted to win. They would do whatever they could to win. And as I recall, years ago, uh, coaches would do anything they could to recruit the best Black athletes to win.
Okay.
To win when it was always an issue. And Michigan State was always a university that had top athletes and
Right.
was good in sports. And
Right.
that was a significant thing. Even John Hanna,
Mm.
if there was a problem, if I had a problem with a faculty member or faculty members, I go to John Hanna. I go directly to the president of the university, and he would do something about it because he knew that I had access to the athletes.
Right. Okay. Well, it does say, okay, after I was an unpaid recruiter and counselor to many Black student athletes working with Duffy, who had a green light from President Hanna. We created an underground railroad for Southern Black athletes. So tell us about the Underground Railroad for
We called it that. A big person in that was Bubba Smith's father.
Uh-huh.
Bubba Smith's father had a relationship with coaches all over the South. And he would spot good Black athletes and bring them to my attention or to the attention of someone else who could find a way to get them to Michigan State. And so we called it an underground railroad, but it
Okay.
was a back door to make sure we got the best Black athletes to Michigan State.
Okay.
Paul Smith was always a number one player.
Oh.
And his father was a number one recruiter. His father was close to Duffy Daugherty. Duffy Daugherty was another person at Michigan State who would be fair, to my knowledge, a fair, so to speak, to Black athletes, and to make sure that they got the resources they needed to compete and to compete well.
Well, you do state in your book, it says State had a well-earned reputation as a magnet for some of the nation's top African-American athletes. Football coach Duffy Daugherty recruited talented Black players from around the country, including the South, where Black players were not recruited by local universities. So they weren't even necessarily recruited by their own universities, but they were recruited by Michigan State. So would you say Michigan State kind of set the tone for increasing and improving the conditions around Black athletes, especially with the work that you did and support and mentorship that you offered, as well as being able to be a conduit directly to
Right,
President Hanna?
right, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So, what would you say the major accomplishments were as a result of the work that you did in that area? Because again, you were a professor of the College of Urban Development. So, but it sounds like the athletes really trusted you. You also say in your book that many of them would come to your house and, meet and visit with you and Letty. And the boys at different times, So how would you say, or what would you say were the most accomplishments?
Well, students at a major university like Michigan State were always looking for someone that they could trust
Gotcha.
and help when they were having trouble, and they knew they could come to me.
Okay.
I might have told you this story. There was a young lady at Michigan State. I was on her doctoral committee.
Mhm.
She came by my office one day And I said, young lady, when are you going to finish? She said, I'm really finished, but my major professor, a young white professor, won't let me complete things.
Hmm.
I said, really? It was during the summer.
Yeah.
I said, well, what is the problem? She said, well, I'm done as far as I'm concerned, but he wants to have dinner with me one evening. And he said, after we have dinner, we'll finish things up.
Hmm.
So that sent another signal to me.
Right. Right.
Professor wanted to have dinner with one of my attractive female students. And all, as
Right.
far as I was concerned, they were all attractive. So I put on my jacket, summertime, walked across the hall, across the street to
Hmm.
his office.
Hmm.
I said, when is Sharon gonna finish? Oh my God, he almost had a heart attack. He said, oh, she's I said, look, I want a date and a time for her to have her PhD.
And no dinner,
I walked out of the
including no
office,
dinner.
and she was done. She was
Hmm.
done. And
Okay.
she is living in Memphis now,
Okay.
and was I think a banker at one time, but she's doing very well. She was doing very well.
Okay.
So I looked at it this way, Laura.
Uh-huh.
I was a professor and a dean, but I worked for Martin Luther King Jr. And I didn't separate my support for Black students from anything else.
Okay.
If they had any kind of a problem, any kind of an issue, I always wanted the men and the women
Hmm.
to know that they could come to me and I would do what I could to help. And I did.
Wonderful.
And as a result of it, um, John Hanna knew that when I came to him with an issue or a problem, it was real.
Hmm.
It was not phony. And people were really fearful of John Hanna. I tell this story. I remember one morning, I went by Hannah's office, and it was known that you never interrupted his meetings. I
Okay.
interrupted one of his meetings and pulled a faculty, our administrator out, who was mistreating Black kids. No, no. He was mistreating Blacks who were trying to buy a home in East
Okay.
Lansing. And I pulled him out of a meeting with John Hanna. And the word was all over campus. Green is unpredictable. What do you mean? He broke up a meeting of John Hanna's
Mm-hmm.
top people and pulled a person out of the meeting. It's in the book. The guy was Lowell Levi. I never forget that. Okay.
Wow.
But
Okay.
I guess I was very perturbed and distressed by whites on the faculty who thought they could take advantage of Blacks just because they were Black. And there were a few like that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it. That's very understandable. So I'm really glad you were there to play that role. So that's why they did feel comfortable coming to you.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And to my
Do
wife
you think
too.
it might, yeah. Do you think it might have something that you also have a background in psychology too? So maybe
I did a joint PhD in education and psychology.
got you. Okay. Okay, now I want to kind of go back a little bit because one of the things also in your book you talk about there were Black athletes. I guess there was some type of recruiting issue, and they added Black athletes from the baseball and track and field teams to support demands. Um, but they the demands were not met, and it caused some type of rebellion, or not so much a rebellion, or maybe a walkout or something that actually made the national news. Do you recall what that was about, or?
I'm not really sure. That's
Okay.
what page of the
That's on page 93. It just, okay, I can read it back to you. I was not the only one to meet with Biggie Munn about equal opportunity. Black activists on the football team, led by running back Lamar Thomas, wanted some specific actions. For example, they wanted the athletic department to hire some Blacks for positions at the university's sports arenas, and they wanted the all-white cheerleading team to add some Blacks to their squad. So there was a gridiron added to their ranks by recruiting Black athletes from the basketball and track and field teams to support their demands, about 40 athletes in all. The football players then threw down the gauntlet by abruptly quitting a spring practice session to meet with Munn about their concerns. So I guess, they weren't meeting their concerns to add more Blacks to probably the coaching team as well as to, the cheerleading team, etc.
Right.
And the players said they would sit out the football season if their demands were not met. And then that threat made national news.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
We did what we could to try to get the university to do the right thing without being disruptive.
Okay.
But sometimes disruption was necessary, like the Wilson Hall incident.
Okay.
That's the cafeteria incident. And the Black students were upset because white employees were not treating Black workers fairly. And the Black workers are pretty sharp. They went to the students. The students came to me, and we went to John Hannah. I always would go to John Hannah because Hannah, I never forget, Hannah had just completed for President Kennedy a study of discrimination against Blacks at Black colleges. And he had a report in his hand when I went to see him, and he said, "Oh my God, I know what he was thinking. I'm going to President Kennedy about discrimination against Blacks in the South, and I'm about to have a major disruption here at Michigan State." And he said, So he reached out to do what he could to keep things,
Culture.
quiet and functional.
Okay. Well, it looked like whatever you guys did do, at some point, they did hire, it says in the spring of 68, Don Coleman was hired as an assistant coach. So he was a he was a Black assistant coach, and he was an excellent candidate. So they did eventually hire a Black assistant coach in Don Coleman.
Yeah. Yeah, Don was a good guy, but there was definitely was good, always fair. Some of those other assistant coaches were not fair. They mistreated Don. Players that Don had played with, all of a sudden, when he was hired as an assistant coach at Michigan State, they weren't too helpful or too friendly to him. So he had his own problems, and he came to me, and I knew the dean of the College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I went to him. I said, "Don Coleman is not happy in his position. He might be leaving. I don't want him to leave. Can you find something for him?" And he made Don something like assistant dean for student affairs over in the College of Osteopathic Medicine. So Don stayed.
Okay, so he had a dual, he had two types of degrees as well, it seems like.
Yeah, Don Coleman was an All-American football player at Michigan State, one of the best ever.
Okay.
And the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor hated to play Michigan State if Don was going to be suiting up. They knew if Don Coleman was going to suit up, they had a game. More than a game. And so, yes, Don was a big person, very helpful, and Duffy Doherty respected him and liked him, so that helped. Duffy Doherty was one of the fair persons in all of athletics that I met during that period of time.
Okay. But it sounds, okay, so you're also saying that Don Coleman he had also been a successful coach at the high school level.
Right.
You know, but at first when you asked him, or, when they presented to him about being one of the assistant coaches at a major university, his response was, "I'm sorry, professor." Oh no, this was, okay, was that Munn? Now, who was Munn?
Biggie Munn was the AD. He was the athletic director at Michigan
Okay.
State. Biggie Munn told me that he felt that blacks did not have the intelligence to coach or quarterback.
Right.
Coach or quarterback. And as we see in the NFL today, all those black coaches coaches and quarterbacks, we
Yeah.
knew then, we knew even then that Biggie Mountain was wrong. He was
Okay.
very wrong.
Oh, so he was the one that said that blacks do not have the ability to coach. Okay, so
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Biggie Man said blacks didn't have the intelligence.
okay.
That's basically what he meant to
Oh,
coach.
got you. But you all proved him wrong, because when he became the assistant coach, meaning Don Coleman, you all actually won a couple of championships, didn't you? Or one championship, looks like.
Don Coleman was, I think, active with Duffy Daugherty when they won the Big Ten uh, championship one year. And
Yeah.
Laura, I would have to go back to my records to check all this.
Okay.
Remember now, this is years ago.
Okay.
But Don Coleman was, I knew about Don before I even came to Michigan State to do my PhD. Don
Mhm.
Coleman was a tremendous athlete,
Okay.
the best. Then he went to Flint, Michigan, and coached at the high school level. And
Hmm.
I was the one that called him and asked him, would he consider coming to Michigan State to coach? He said, yes, I would consider it. And he did. And he became very successful.
Well, on page 93 in your book, it says the spring of 1968, Don Coleman was hired as an assistant coach.
That's right.
That's what, so, okay. All right. So, what would you say would be the major outcome of your efforts in bringing greater equality between Black and white college athletes, at least at Michigan State, and did it have some impact on other universities in the country?
Yeah. Other universities are watching.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I remember just officiating. That was a problem too. There were no black officials. And there was one game I can't think of his name anymore, but he was the head of the Big Ten Association.
Hmm.
They were constantly monitoring me, what I was doing with athletes, and so forth. And I had said, look, if you guys don't have some black officials that officiates these games, black athletes aren't going to play.
Hmm.
That was always a concern to keep things quiet.
Okay, because they wanted to win, right?
Yeah, they
Because
wanted to win, and they wanted to win, and as I often would say, in their way. They didn't
oh,
want to win fairly, and so that was always a challenge
right,
for us.
right.
But Michigan State was a leader. I've got a picture in my book somewhere with
Uh-huh.
Duffy Daugherty with all the black athletes,
Oh,
and Duffy was a good guy.
okay.
I would find it hard to be critical of him when it comes to fairness.
Okay.
The athlete was a good athlete,
Uh-huh.
qualified, clean cut, stayed out of trouble. Duffy would support him 100%.
Okay. Well, with that being said, do you feel like the athletes themselves who had concerns, did they feel that some of their concerns had been resolved at some point?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Uh, it would be interesting if you could find, say, Jimmy Ray, Raya,
Okay.
who was the quarterback at Michigan State. Some of them, ask them how they feel even today about the changes that occurred
Okay.
uh, at Michigan State. Jimmy Ray, I know, is alive. Bubba Smith, I think, is deceased, and his brother Toady, too. I think they're both deceased.
Okay.
But Jimmy Ray is one athlete that's been around a while. He knows about conditions at Michigan State at that time and what we had to do to turn things around.
Okay. Okay. All right then. So, is there anything else you want to share about that? The time?
Um,
Um,
well, I think that's pretty much it. When I see black officials today at the Super Bowl coming up, I'm
mhm.
sure they're going to have at least one, maybe two black officials.
Oh
That
yeah. Oh no, they have quite a few now. I want to say they have.
I mean, at that game,
Oh, at that game.
officiating the Super Bowl game, you
Uh,
will probably see at least one or two black officials officiating that game. Remember, Michigan State got them started.
okay.
That's right.
Well, it seems like Michigan State was a pioneer in the civil rights movement in a lot of areas as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was thanks to your being there as well as your connection with Dr. King as well. Um, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about in honor of Black History Month and talking about athletes. Is there anything you want to say about the work that you did with Arthur Ashe?
Yeah.
We had
Yeah.
talked a little bit about that and
Arthur Ashe was a good guy. He and I and Andy Young, we went to South Africa together to South Africa was a great sports country,
Mhm.
but they were segregated.